And it really will make a difference, especially for you guys that have plateaued and don't seem to be progressing. Hi guys, I'm Mark McKillier with Live Anabolic, and today I want to talk about how to create that mind-muscle connection. And basically, you know, it's for every muscle group. We want to try to do that. And I'm going to kind of explain several little tricks that I use to kind of make my workouts more effective and make basically building muscle easier and more efficient. Because, you know, when you're at the gym or at home working out, you know, you don't want to find yourself just kind of going through the motions. You know, lifting the weight, pulling the bands, pulling the cables, whatever it is. Because yes, that works, but it is not as effective. You're not going to build as much muscle as if you're really focusing on what you're doing and feeling the connection between your brain and the muscle fibers that you're actually focusing on with a specific exercise. So let's just start off by what I would say is the single most important thing, or the key to creating that mind-muscle connection, and that is, guys, you have to use really good form. The better form, the better you're gonna feel the contraction in the muscles. And by good form, I mean full range of motion, and then also tempo. So I'm going to use curls as an example exercise because it's just, everybody knows what it is and what it's for. And it's a good exercise because it's so easy to cheat on and lose that mind-muscle connection, all right? So you can have full range of motion with curls. You go all the way down and you come all the way up, but still have terrible form and have no mind-muscle connection. The way you would do that, the wrong way, is you use momentum. All right, you go too fast. All right, you use your back and you sway and you use momentum to start the weight. All right, and then only when you get here do your muscles take over and finish the last little part of the movement. And then of course, you just let the weight drop back down. You don't control the weight down. So that would be not only terrible form, but that's where you don't have that mind-muscle connection. I see professional bodybuilders, big guys in their 20s and early 30s that are just jacked. They're on steroids, yes, but you'd be surprised how little weight they use. Now, yes, it's more weight than you and I might be curling, but relative to their size, their muscle mass, their potential strength, they're using relatively light dumbbells when they're doing curls. And that's because they're in front of a mirror and they are really using good form. You'll see a lot of these guys doing alternating. That's kind of my favorite because you get a better mind-muscle connection when you can just focus on one arm at a time. Now, I don't have any dumbbells, all right, but these guys will make sure that they lower the weight slowly and then raise the weight slowly. You don't have to go incredibly or overly slow. You don't have to over-exaggerate the tempo, all right? But you need to lift the weight so that you can feel the weight. You can feel your muscles contracting. And I like doing this because I can actually look at my bicep, all right, when I'm doing alternating curls, all right, like this. If you're using a barbell, especially if you're in front of a mirror, that's another great way because you have to use both hands at the same time. But you can focus on yourself and check your form out. And you don't want to be bending over and then slowly coming back. Even if you're not yanking it up, when you bend over and stand up, you're using your lower back to help get the weight from here to here. And then you finish it with your biceps. Bad form, okay? So just using exceptionally good form, and part of good form means full range of motion and tempo, slow, control the way up and down, is imperative for getting that mind-muscle connection. So another thing that can totally screw up your mind-muscle connection, besides, you know, just swaying, is bouncing the weight. So your tendons and ligaments are stretchy. They're kind of like, you know, they're like rubber bands. And on some exercises, you can get a rubber band effect by letting the weight go down and then kind of bounce off the bottom of the movement. Let's say I was doing a bench press with a barbell. So, you know, your elbows are only gonna come down so far and they won't go any further, and I've maxed out the stretch in my tendons and my ligaments, and they're gonna wanna, if you let the weight down fast, it'll kind of bounce back. You'll see the bar wanna naturally bounce back up 2 or 3 inches. That's the equivalent of swaying when you're doing curls. So if you're laying on your back and I got a bar and I'm letting the bar drop down and basically hit my chest, it will bounce off your chest, but it also bounces off your ligaments and tendons that are at their max stretched position. And that will get the weight moving up, all right, the first few inches. Then your muscles take over and push it the last bit of the way. To avoid that, you know, you're gonna lower the weight slower and then don't let it bounce. Come down to full stretch and then just start pushing up. You don't want any kind of explosive movement. Power lifters that are trying to lift a whole lot of weight, they will explode at the bottom of the movement, all right? That kind of gets the weight moving, and then they can continue contracting and pushing that weight. Maybe if you're doing really deep squats, you'll see people go way, way, way down, and they can kind of bounce off the bottom, all right, where their tendons and ligaments have stretched to the max. You have kind of like a bounce effect. If you're doing that leg press machine, you know, where you're pushing the sled up at like a 45-degree angle, and you let that big weight come all the way down and your knees are coming back to your chest, there's a point where your knees just aren't gonna go any further. You know, your hips and your knees are at their maximum stretched potential, and that builds up a lot of tension in your ligaments and your tendons. And that rubber band effect, you can use that to kind of push that weight up with your legs and get it moving again. Well, you're not getting that really good mind muscle connection. The guys that really are doing a great job at building big legs control that sled on the way down, get to full stretch, and then start pushing up. They don't explode up, or they don't allow the sled to bounce off the bottom, okay? I'm using my hands to represent my feet here, okay? You know, it's several different things go into getting that mind-muscle connection, and I'm gonna talk about a couple more. One of the other things that you know, you guys that work out at home are not gonna really have available, and that is mirrors. That's why you see so many mirrors at a gym, especially behind the dumbbell racks, right? There's usually this long rack of dumbbells, dozens and dozens of dumbbells, different weights, and then there's a big, long bank of mirrors. Well, that's because so many exercises that you do with dumbbells can be done while looking in the mirror, and I kind of mentioned that a minute ago. When you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you can actually see not only your form and your full range of motion, but your brain actually sees you contracting your muscles, all right, in the mirror, and that actually creates a much better mind-muscle connection. During COVID, I turned my garage into a gym, and I had dumbbells and bands, and I had a bench, and you know, I was actually getting some pretty good workouts in, and some buddies would come over and work out, but it was weird, you know, doing some of these exercises where you're just staring at a wall, you know? So I went to Home Depot and I bought a couple of big mirrors, you know, those sliding like closet doors, you know, the full length, and they're made out of mirrors. I bought those and just put them up in my garage, just laid them up against the wall, and then it just magically transformed my garage gym into like a real functional gym. It was amazing how big a difference those mirrors made. Another way to create that mind-muscle connection, and I do it all the time without even intentionally thinking about it or knowing I'm doing that, and that is I close my eyes, especially when you're really straining hard on the last few reps of a set. You'll notice, let's say I'm doing tricep push downs, you know, I'm on a cable machine and I'm holding a rope and I'm doing these triceps. You know, I might be counting out, you know, and I'm looking straight ahead, and I'm really using good form, all right? But then when you really start to strain, those last 3 or 4 reps that you can just barely get out, I will find myself closing my eyes and squinting. And when I close my eyes, a lot of times instead of just counting, I'm actually envisioning my triceps, like I'm actually seeing myself almost in a mirror with those muscles contracting. Just try it, give it a shot. I mean, sometimes it'll just come naturally to you, and for some guys, you actually have to concentrate on it, but it doesn't hurt. Try closing your eyes for every rep in a set and see how that affects you. See if you can feel the connection better. And then finally, guys, another trick to getting that mind-muscle connection, and that is don't focus on the weights or the handles if you're using, bands or cable machines. Don't focus on moving the weight up and down, okay? Don't focus on pulling a bar down to your chest for like lat pull downs. Focus on your joints. So for lat pull downs, okay, when I'm at the gym, I'll be holding on to a big bar, okay? So if I just looked at the bar and said, all right, I'm about to pull that bar down until it gets to here, that works, it's effective. I'll get a pump. But if I focus on my elbows, I'm literally thinking, pull my elbows down and get my elbows back as deep and as far behind me, then the bar just ends up where it's supposed to be, okay? But I can feel my muscles contracting way more if I'm focusing on pulling my elbows down and not pulling my hands down. I know it sounds weird, okay, but give it a try, I promise. And it's not just me saying this. I mean, I pick up a lot of these tricks and advice from serious professionals, that actually, make a living, bodybuilding, okay? So I'm constantly reading things online and I'll see research papers and people with PhDs in physiology and stuff like that. And that actually does work. All right, so guys, in wrapping this video up, creating that mind-muscle connection will help build muscle. Even if you don't have a good mind-muscle connection, just lifting weights and using good form will do great. It'll do wonders for you. But you can get that next little itty bit, all right, of benefit if you really start using this, okay, instead of just counting how many times you lift the weight, and go through the motion. And it really will make a difference, especially for you guys that have plateaued and don't seem to be progressing, all right? Because it's really about building muscle, not about seeing how much weight you can lift. And like I mentioned earlier with some of these bodybuilders that are really big guys, they might be curling 45-pound dumbbells, all right? That might be a lot for you and me, but these guys are big. If they wanted to, they could curl 65 or 70-pound dumbbells. But instead, they're actually trying to make that 45-pound dumbbell heavy on their biceps by using really good form and then feeling every inch of that movement up and down. They're trying to make the weight harder to lift, all right? It's not the same as powerlifting where you're trying to lift as much weight as possible. This is a situation where we're trying to make it difficult for our muscles to lift weight. I know it sounds almost weird or sometimes counterintuitive, but trust me, you'll see the benefits, and then eventually you will get stronger. It's not just about making making the weight really, really heavy and seeing no results. When you build muscle, you do get stronger. But this ain't gonna happen overnight, guys. You gotta stick with it and never give up on yourself.